People who have walked out of a job in the middle of the day, when was the last straw? My first job was as a cart pusher at Walmart. I was a teenager and believed that if I worked hard, they'd promote me and move me to a job inside. I showed up every day and worked my butt off. After about 3 months, they promoted a guy who had started after me who was known to be a slacker. When I asked the manager why I didn't get moved inside first, he said, "You're the only one who's dependable out there." And it took a while for that to sink in, but once it did, I went back and told him I quit, handed in my badge, and he said, "If you just walk out with no notice, we'll never hire you back." I just laughed and told him, "Hey, that was fine by me."
I tell you what, that's the problem with being reliable, man. If you're the guy who excels at the grunt work, you will only be rewarded with more grunt work. I tell you this as somebody who always shows up to help people move. Now, don't get me wrong, they appreciate it, but anytime someone needs help moving, they don't go, "Oh, you got us on the last one, we appreciate that, we'll find someone else." They go, "Hey,
You know who's reliable? Get over here!" Next story. Coffee shop barista. Small neighborhood shop, the kind where I would have your drink ready for a regular ready to go before they would even get to the counter. Owner wanted to move, so they sold the shop to a completely clueless douche nozzle that used his wife's retirement to fund his dream of owning his own business. The man couldn't tell you the difference between a latte and a mocha if his life depended on it. Probably would have smelled a bag of rabbit poop if I told him it was coffee beans. During a particularly busy morning, I suggested that boss man move his personal belongings from the largest table in our space. After watching 3 large groups enter the shop, see there were no tables available, and leave. Boss man freaked the F out on me, telling me I have no idea how to run a coffee business, and to never tell him what to do again. This was on the floor, in front of the full house. I said nothing, just turned to get my coat and left, and he went out of business very shortly after. Next story. I was working at a beer warehouse that did its own recycling, meaning I had to dump a bunch of empties into a giant can crusher. It was wet, it was dirty, it smelled awful. But the worst part was that people would often throw out used needles with their empties. We had protective gloves to protect us, but they were crap and only used to cover the company's butt in case something happened. I had a couple of near misses with needles, but never actually got pricked. Until one day, when the inevitable happened, and I pricked myself pretty bad on a needle. It went straight through the glove like it was nothing and was literally hanging in me. I told my manager and he said, "Just get back to work. It's not a big deal." He even denied me taking the rest of the day off so I could go and get it checked out. So I told him to shove it, and I left. Next story. Boss at the time was a screamer, couldn't do anything right, and I was a ground man for earth movers, evacuators, and the like. I was busy working away smashing concrete. He comes cruising by in an excavator, tink, 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 and for some reason shouts to me, "If you don't want to be here, you can leave." Maybe I had a salty look on my face, maybe he's just a twat, but I thought about what he said for maybe 10 minutes or so, dropped my tools on the ground and walked to my truck and drove away. Never looked back, and never heard from them besides my final check. F you, CLAC. Next story. I was working in a tire shop at the time. A guy that I had trained got promoted above me because reasons. So one day I'm changing tires, and he starts screaming at me, telling me I'm doing this and that the wrong way. I'm like, first of all, no. Second, I taught you how to do this, so don't go trying to tell me how to do it. He grabbed me by the shoulder, spun me around so he could yell in my face. He's nose to nose with me, poking me in the chest, telling me I'm effing lazy, I'm a piece of crass, I'm this, I'm that. I still had the tire bar in my hand and I was seeing red. I had the sense to know that either I walk out of here right now and I'm out of a job, or I brain this douche nozzle with the tire bar, and then I'm out of a job and I go to jail. I pushed him off of me and dropped the tire bar, walked up front, handed my manager my fob for the time clock and my tool pouch, gave the old dude a "go F yourself" on my way out the door. Next story. I had already given in my notice a few days prior and had a new job lined up, but the big box retailer I worked for at the time put me on an all-day greeting duty, and the managers just started being jerks, not letting me go to the toilet, etc. So after the 3rd day, I just walked away, got my stuff and left. Next story. It was my shift manager. I liked the job, but good lord, that manager was something else. Incredibly nitpicky. controlling, very prone to panic. It just got to be more than I could handle, and so I called the store manager on the phone, told her I couldn't take working with this woman anymore, and asked if she would like me to stay until someone else came in to take over for me. She declined my offer and told me to just go. This shift manager was there for about 6 years, and upwards of 20 people quit because of her for the same reasons I had. Next story. Was working as a butcher at a high-end shop. Specialty sausages, all-natural meats, exotic deli section, stuff like that. On top of the usual crappy parts of working as a butcher, hard work, low pay, whiny customers, weird hours. The place never had their equipment serviced, never had their knives sharpened. Sold frozen hormone-fed crap meat as all natural, complete with all natural prices. Recycled, expired, and by expired, I mean it was green meat into their hot bar food, forced the butcher staff to work in the deli, which led to the customer complaints from the blood all over our arms and aprons, and this job paid like 50 cents over the minimum wage. So one day, the owner came back into the cutting room and started berating me for cutting new steaks to replace some of the old ones in the case that were obviously not going to sell as they were starting to get kinda crusty. He screamed in Polish until he was red in the face, threw his hat on the bloody ground and stormed out. I waited until it got really busy, told him to go F himself, and left. Next story. Not midday but mid-shift. New Year's Eve. I'm a cook. Management assures us kitchen's closed at 7 as fast as you can, clean up, get the heck out. Decent deal. Hostess at 7:20 is still letting people in the door. It's down to me and 2 other people. We just drew the short straws, and we're at the point where dishes alone are going to be several hours. My girlfriend and I had tickets for a gala, and she's literally waiting in the car. I say to the hostess, you need to roll up your sleeves and get to doing some dishes because I don't want to be here because you didn't know enough to close the doors. Twice, I asked. 8 p.m., she let in another table. I took off my apron, handed it to the dude. I apologized and said, I'm sorry, this is stupid, but the tickets were worth more than my job, clearly. I felt bad for the kitchen staff, but what am I gonna do? I'm glad the hostess had nowhere to go, though. Yeah, daggum, that would be frustrating, man. I mean, it's not like she could be making that much more off the tips for a few extra tables, if they, split them throughout the house. And I don't know how much tickets to the gala cost. In fact, I don't even know what the gala is, but your girlfriend's waiting in the car. I'm sure she spent a while to get ready. She's very excited for a very extravagant date on New Year's Eve. I think the price of being the hero and just showing up for her in that moment is gonna be worth really more than anything. And besides, left a bad job in the old year. Starting off hot. Next story. Factory job, refurbishing computers. We were working 2 hours a day of mandatory overtime and Saturdays as well. It got to the point that we had no life outside of work because of 10-hour days during the week plus Saturday. And figure into that lunch, so it's actually 10.5-hour days with the commute to and from as well. This went on for over 3 months. I was exhausted, burned out. We asked for an extra break because 10 hours and 2 breaks plus 1 lunch is rough. We were told no, because it hurt the workflow. I only had 1 day a week, honestly, for stuff like grocery shopping and what have you do on that day. I didn't want to do all the crap. Add to this, it was only the production floor that was on overtime. Shipping and receiving wasn't. So, there was nowhere to put these computers other than on the conveyor system, which was 100% at capacity and not allowed to put processed computers anywhere else. Not on the floor, not on an empty pallet. And slowing down because there was no room for more computers and it wasn't an option. Then we were told in a midday meeting that the entire reason for the overtime was competition. One branch was doing it and producing some awesome numbers, so we were doing it to compete. There was no demand, it was ego. We were all completely upset. Then the next thing hit. Starting that day, security finished their upgrades, and now you had 3 tries at the security gate getting to the break room. Fail and go to the back of the line where you would then be given the wand. I have 2 steel plates in my right arm and screws holding them in place. I never got through security without the wand. Most of the guards knew why and just let me through anyways, but now that wasn't allowed. On top of that, we had to clock out before going through security, so a 30-minute lunch, I was going to have to clock out, fail security, go to the back of the line, get wanded, and then hope that I had enough time remaining to eat. And when figuring in breaks, I was never going to be able to take a break because there would be no way I could get through security in enough time. And break began when you walked away from your workstation, not when you entered the break room. So, I asked about those of us with steel plates and if there would be an exception made for us. No, was the answer. It was too much of an effort on their part to make an exception for a very small minority. We dismissed our lunch, I had to clock out, went through security, went to the back of the line, got the wand. I explained to them why I had trouble, showed them the surgical scars again, and they said, well, these are new rules. I hung up my badge as we were all supposed to do, said my goodbyes to my coworkers who were already done with their lunches by the time I got through security, then I got in my car and left. Next story. I worked at a cell phone plant where we would box up phones and send them to stores. I worked from noon to midnight, Monday through Friday, with mandatory overtime on Saturdays if they wanted it. Well, for a few weeks we had been working Saturdays and everyone was stressed. The next Friday rolls around and they tell us the entire day that we aren't working Saturday. An hour before we leave, they say they've changed their mind. I was mad, had words with the manager, and just left. I was young, still living with the family, so it wasn't the end of the world to lose my job, but it still sucked. Next story. I was director of database operations at a large corporation. I'd had my job for a week when they fired the guy that hired me, which was a great start, but I stuck it out. The CTO was a guy who obviously did not like me. Nothing I did was good enough. One day he calls me into a spur-of-the-moment meeting. It was a database consultant, me, and the CTO. The CTO starts talking about what we need to do in my department. I was prepared because I had been working on planning from day one and started laying out what I thought we needed to do. The CTO physically turns his back to me, starts asking the consultant, who had been in the building all of 15 minutes, what he thought we should do. I got up and said, well, it's obvious you don't need me in this meeting, and I walked out. And I'm walking out of the room, the CTO starts literally screaming at me, don't you walk out away from me! You get back in here right now! Yeah, how about, no. I went to HR, quit, and told them the reason why. 2 days later, HR called me and asked me to come in for a meeting. They said if I wasn't comfortable coming to the office, they would meet with me anywhere. I told them I was fine coming into the office. I went in and they offered me 3 months of severance. I think they were afraid I was going to sue them for the way I was treated. I wasn't, but I took the money and never looked back. That CTO, by the way, was out within 2 months. Next story. After being ill for over a decade, I went job hunting. I found that employers looked at my CV and just ignored me. I had applied for 2 months to every crap job available, so decided to volunteer at a charity shop to show I was willing and trying to get some experience. My manager at first seemed nice, but very short-staffed. So before I knew it, I was doing 6 days a week, 9 to 5, and always on the shop floor serving customers. She would sit upstairs sifting through donations and taking the best items home to sell on eBay. She kept the profits as the items never appeared in the books. When I asked her about this, she complained about her wages. Then, after a series of shoplifting incidents, she told me she expected me to restrain and stop all suspected shoplifters. I told her no, I wouldn't, as the Eastern Europeans doing the stealing worked in groups and I could get hurt. The final straw was when I finally got a job interview after 4 months of volunteering. I asked her if she would be a reference, as I had no other job experience, and she said she didn't know me well enough and I just wasn't dependable. Next story. I worked for a contractor. I'd only been there for 2 months, but anytime I showed initiative, I would get shot down or given the runaround. It was the worst. Eventually, I found a new job that started the following Monday. I was planning to quit Thursday and get a long weekend, but the boss came to my office on Tuesday morning and told me I had to do X, Y, and Z for a big job the company was bidding for. I listened to his spiel and said, "That's great, except I quit right now." Best decision I've ever made in my professional life. Next story. I was working at Domino's. Everyone who has done fast food knows the closing shift sucks butt cheeks. I liked to be the person who volunteered for it if people called in sick, but hated it when lazy people refused to do it. I came to work. Manager said, "We need you to close tonight." Everybody else who had not closed recently or were standing around to hear what I would say, it was the 4th emergency call in a row that week. I said no. Turned around and left. They didn't even try to call me after. Also, I got next week's schedule the same day. I was scheduled for all closings. Man, a lot of jobs and a lot of life is just going to be a big example of people taking advantage of what you're willing to offer, okay? And this is a simple, you give an inch, they take a mile. And that's the domino effect. Next story. I used to manage a popular fast food restaurant where quality is most definitely our recipe. We went through 2 general managers in a month, and the new one scheduled me for short closers. I need 5, was scheduled 3, and the remaining 3 didn't show up. They had a track record of blowing off work. I called everyone on my store's payroll, called the other 2 nearby stores, got nobody. Finally, in a desperate attempt, I called the district manager and asked for help. Got none from them. I ran the store by myself that night, closed it all up, ended up leaving at 7 a.m., 6 hours later than the closers are supposed to leave. I left my keys and a note saying I would never be back. Next story. I actually did it a couple of times, but it was always on a first day. One time it was the best. "Go pull 200 of that black pipe for a job tomorrow." There's hornet's nests in those pipes. I see it. Do you have a spray or something? "No, just go pull the pipe." Okay. I walk outside and I just get in the car and drive home. Next story. I worked in a pawn shop, and things were going well for a couple of years, until we got stuck with a new manager who was not very good at the job. Guy walks in and wants $200 on PRS guitar. These typically hold their value and go for far more than that. I informed him that I could loan him quite a bit more if needed it, and thanked me, but told me he didn't want to let it go and he would be back in a week. Right then, the manager walks in and goes, "Let me see that." Looks the guitar all over to give the impression that he knew what he was doing and said, "I'll give you $50 for it." Guy obviously gets upset. He says, "It doesn't matter what this guy offered, I run things here." After he left, we stepped in the back, got into a screaming match over why that was so wrong, and I walked right out. Next story. I was 18 and about 6 months into my job. I was basically screwing in hinges on a wide array of different windows ranging from normal residential house windows to big windows that go in high-rise buildings. Got a strange order for a very rarely used set of hinges on my screen for about 20 big-sized steel windows in the production line. I went to my manager to confirm that the order was correct. He confirmed it. 5 hours later, about 5 minutes before I'm about to clock out after a 12-hour shift, my manager runs out of his office in a panic. The hinges were the wrong ones. Whoever wrote the order into the systems had screwed up, and he, the manager, had screwed up too. I get told that if any of those windows actually get sent out of the workshop, I get $40 deducted per window, potentially $800 in total. Yeah, cue me scrambling like crazy. I even ran out of the workshop to stop a lorry leaving with 10 of the windows, unloaded them myself because the loaders and unloaded had gone home for the day. I then work an extra 3 hours, unpaid, to correct the mistake which I hadn't even caused. Payday rolls around 2 weeks later, and I'm deducted $400 from my paycheck because technically 10 windows had left the workshop. I walked out straight away, despite my manager begging me to stay and saying he would try and get the deduction reduced to $200. Yeah, no, thank you, F you, and F that company, honestly. I spent 3 hours unpaid correcting someone else's mistake just to then still lose 35% of my pay. Same company would fire people 4 weeks before Christmas, building industry slows down in the winter, and then rehire them when the demand picked up again in the summer. Was very much a moment that changed my life and made me go back to school. It's been a long 3 years, but if all goes well, I should be studying international business at a top 100 in the world university starting in September.
That whole thing is just absolutely nuts. What an absolute shame. You broke those windows, you owe us money. I quit. Wait, okay, hold on. Actually, we can try and knock it down a little bit. Good for you for walking, man. And sometimes, you know what, you gotta break a few windows to climb out of them. And on to bigger and better things you are. Next story. This was about 2 months ago. My company had fell into complete chaos. We acquired a new company and launched a new product line. Everyone was running around and we were stretched pretty thin. My boss transferred to the new office, 1,000 miles away. Left me and one other guy behind. No clue what was going on. He never spoke to us, never gave us direction, no tasks, anything. His boss was a VP and was on the road almost exclusively. So for about 6 months or so, I did almost zero work. I was finishing up a master's degree at night and applying for new jobs. I spent my work days on Reddit, at the gym, answering a few emails, listening to podcasts, doing homework, and whatever else kept me busy. No one ever spoke to me about my job or performance. At first, I was worried, but after a month of doing nothing productive, it felt like a game to see what I could get away with. I finally landed a dream job. What even is that? That paid a lot more and was in an industry I wanted to explore. I took the offer. I sent an email to my boss asking for him to call me or set up a meeting. 3 days of no response. I sent a second email that CC'd HR and his boss giving me my notice. No response. I showed up on Monday, slipped a letter of resignation under the door of HR, who also was never around, and packed up my desk. Waited until noon. HR still hadn't showed up, so I just left. No one ever called me, emailed me, asked any questions. It was really bizarre. I got my last paycheck and some official notices in the mail signaling that I had left their company. For reference, I was a design engineer at this company making $65,000, so it's not like I was minimum wage. It was also a smaller company, like 60 employees. Next story. Boss got his finger up in my face lecturing me in front of customers. He thought he was being funny, but I slammed the stack of plates down on the table and just walked out the front door. His mom, the boss of the cafe, started to cry because this was in the middle of lunch rush and she would be on her own. Should have raised a better man, and she wouldn't have had that problem. Next story. I work as a window tinter. I had worked for this place for about a year. I went into the office, asked about my vacation after a year of working, and they told me I had to work a whole calendar year. I started in February, so would have to work another almost full year for my vacation. A few days later, I had a work order for a full tint. After install, I pulled it out the front manager, then came back and told me to pull it all back around for a sun strip on the windshield. I completed the sun strip and pulled it back around. He came back and told me to pull it back around again to tint the taillights, expressing angrily that I should have read the work order. Of course I had, and there was no order for either the brow or taillights. After I pulled the car back around and tinted one taillight before it was time for my lunch break, the manager told me I could not have lunch until I finished the car. I told him, "Taste my privates," and walked out. That was the day I started my own company. Next story. I took a second job just to make a cushion until my wife was able to go back to work. We had just had our second child. I was already a manager at a fast food place, and I took another job at a little diner downtown. I cooked a little, did dishes, just a few different things, never really had a spot. Well, one day one of the kitchen crew calls in, and I was put in their spot. We were doing good until my wife calls me. Our newborn was running a fever. I asked the manager at the time if I could clock out and go get my wife. She was going to drop me back off and take the baby to doctor herself. The whole thing would have taken maybe 45 minutes in the middle of the afternoon, and we weren't busy. The manager said no. So I asked for a smoke break, which she granted, and just left. We didn't necessarily need the income from my second job. Next story. I worked in daycare at a private school. Showed up to work on time, started my morning routine with the kids per usual, but got a random phone call an hour into my day. I got someone to watch over my class and stepped aside into the classroom to answer, and it turned out to be my boss. "Why aren't you at work?" I am? "Oh, well, why are you answering the phone?" "Because I'm expecting a call from my doctor." "But just get back to work then." I continued on with my day until it was nap time for the kids when my boss pulled me aside and told me I was being fired for answering my phone during work hours and was asked to finish up my day. Yeah, right.
Luckily, the other women I worked with said they would help cover my class after I left. My only regret was not being able to say goodbye to my class. Last I heard, my old boss got the tip of a pinky finger chopped off from the giant paper cutter we used for craft, so yeah, karma. Next story. Promoted to supervisor after 2 months. Never got my raise. Took them 2 additional months to get me an email address. 2 months after that, my team didn't hit the goal, and they told me weeks later, the day prior to commissions being paid out, that if the team didn't hit the goal, the managers forfeit their entire commission. They never gave me that raise, so I walked the next day. Next story. I was on a site for IT tech, entry level. All I could fix was basic stuff. I knew nothing about servers or networking. We contracted that out, so when an alarm in the server room went off, I called the network tech on call. I did what I was supposed to do, what ideas and what I was instructed to do. My boss decided to call me a female dog out of the phone for doing my job. I stood up, took the elevator to the 9th floor, and tossed my keys on the CEO's desk and left. Next story. My boss was a jerk. The hours were long, 12 hours a day, and the pay was crappy. But what broke the camel's back was when he made the breaks 3 hours apart instead of 2, and 5 minutes shorter. We all busted our butts and didn't deserve it. He tried to get me to sign a paper to agree with the changes, but I just walked off without saying anything. Next story. Creepo manager who was stealing money from the safe, and I knew about it, and no one believed me, and they were harassing me, and who basically stole my promotion when he waltzed into my job because he knew the top manager and wanted to have a sit-down meeting because of the obvious hostility I had towards him. He told me my attitude needed to change, and I said that would never happen because of the above reasons. He got really angry, started screaming at me really close to my face, then got up, walked out of the office, slamming the door behind him. I left right then and there. After the fact, a couple months down the line, Creepo was also fired and banned from the store for incidents similar to above, and I was apologized to and offered another position within the company. Next story. I was excluded from a photo shoot with an award that was won based on mostly my work the prior year. People from other departments were included in that photo because the company was trying to woo a new client with the promise that we had 4 times the active staff we actually did to do their work. Why was I excluded? Oh, it would be too difficult to explain why I wasn't around to do the work because I'd handed in my notice due to moving to somewhere. Commuting to and from work was more of a nightmare than expected. But it was okay. For all those people, other than people who wouldn't be around to do the work, to be in the picture to pad the numbers. I went to lunch, just never went back. Despite frantic calls from my department line manager, emailed the proper manager later saying I would not be finishing my notice period because of it. I got paid anyway, though. Tale as old as time, people not being credited for the work they've put in. Recognition's hard to come by, people just riding the coattails of your hard-earned success. I, unfortunately, have done this a few times on the other side. I'm not proud of it, okay, but there were certainly times where I didn't really contribute to the group project. But you better believe I signed my name and got full credit. Just a formal shout out to Mark and Andrea from college writing too. I'm sorry, you guys, you really did a bang up job. Next story. Worked at a certain orange home improvement store as a cashier, and had finished ringing up 2 men who continued to loiter beside me while I was cashiering. Once I was alone and didn't have a line of customers, one of the men said to me, I'd love to take you to a party and get you so effed up you wouldn't even be able to remember what happened to you. I used my radio to call a manager to the front for help immediately. The manager arrived, recognized the men, and got into a laughing and joking conversation with them. When they finally left, in a white van with no windows, I crap you not, my manager took me to the side and asked me what happened. I explained the situation and she responded by stating, You just need to get thicker skin, sweetie. Yeah, well, same store about a week prior to that incident, I had the worst period ever and bled through my clothes and repeatedly begged my manager to go to the bathroom. I was then told that I'd have to tell her exactly why I needed to go to the bathroom and what kind of bathroom I would need to be having. Ended up having to use my lunch break to drive to a Walmart to buy pants and underwear. Nightmare, nightmare, nightmare! Next story. I was the weekend breakfast cook at a chain sit-down restaurant while in high school. Completely unqualified for the job, but they needed help, and I needed a job. It was a 2-person job, but after my first week the other breakfast cook quit. I toughed it out for a few weekends without him, and when I asked about another cook, Donna, the manager said we'd save some overhead just having me cook, and she'd come help when it got busy. Well, she never helped. Fast forward 2 weekends later and I'm working and have like 20 tickets on the board. At least 20 eggs going and probably 10 pancakes, 10 French toast orders, all of it, struggling super hard to keep up. I shouted for Donna multiple times and she just sat on her stupid butt in the office. So finally the waitresses start bickering, and Donna walks her tubby butt out of the office to help. I was in such a hurry, I was plating orders on the wrong plates just to get them out. Donna sees this and is enraged. She takes one of the orders that was up under the heat lamp and throws it against the wall, breaking the plate, and turns to me and screams something like, "What the F is wrong with you?" and starts to belittle me for how behind I was. It was that moment right there that I untied my apron, dropped it on the floor, and said, "I quit." She fell all over herself apologizing and asking me to stay to help her get the orders out. I just walked right out of the kitchen into the dining area and headed for the door. She started screaming, "You can't quit! You can't effing quit in front of a packed house!" The entire place went quiet and I just kept walking. She started screaming about me not leaving with my work shirt on, so I took it off mid-restaurant and dropped that on the floor too. She shouted something. I turned around and simply said, "I would never eat at this restaurant after working in the kitchen. It is disgusting." So I walked shirtless to my car, and I pulled out for the last time. I saw a good stream of customers leaving as well. 3 months later, the restaurant burned down. I don't remember why, but I heard it was Donna's fault. Hey, if you're reading this, F you, Donna, and F the Naugatuck friendlies. Next story. Getting raided by the DA's office, local police, and state detectives in the matter of rigging public bids on infrastructure projects. The office manager's doing, while us lowly designers, surveyors, CAD techs, and IT personnel had no idea and thought we worked for a legitimate firm. I spent the next 2 months securing other employment while showing up to work every day and acting like it was no big deal. That clearly law enforcement was in the wrong. Meanwhile, I focused my efforts on training my staff how to do similar work at other reputable firms while I did as close to nothing as possible for my employer. When I received the email informing me of my final offer of employment, I closed my laptop, took my office keys off my keyring and placed them on my desk, stood up, and left. I got several odd looks and questions of what I was doing or where I was going. It was a very busy office without much time for just getting up and taking off in the middle of the day. I simply said, "So long and good luck," and never heard a word from those people again. My last check was deposited in full and on time. Next story. It was through a temp agency. They told me it was a data entry for a financial institution. What they should have said was working in the call center for one of the biggest and shadiest payday loan shark scams companies in the country. I watched the single dad that raised me struggle to get out from under payday and title loans many times growing up, so the place disgusted me. But I had been without a job for over a year and was absolutely desperate. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. Day in and day out, I had to take and make upwards of 5 times per day each. Calls from people in the dire straits begging for an extension. I listened to grown men and women alike in tears or on the verge of them tell me it was either make a payment on their loan or buy Christmas presents for their kids. Paying rent, keeping the lights on. Each time I had to essentially tell them, "Too bad." My coworkers would mock these people, either after the call was completed or sometimes on the call, just on mute. "Well, I knew what I was doing when I signed up for the assistance and now I gotta buy food. Well." Disgusted is not a strong enough word. I couldn't sleep at night doing this job, so I walked out after a week and I never went back. I had a very similar experience working in life insurance. Now, I'm not saying that all life insurance salespeople are shady and dark and gross and slimy, but all the ones I know are. Oftentimes, I'd go in these ride-alongs with people and we'd go to these senior benefits and sweet talk our way into the home, and then they would trick them into switching their plan over with them so that they can, obviously get some money off of it.
And I'm in training at this point, so I'm like trying to take notes and write stuff down. So I'm asking, hey, why was her policy so bad that we had to switch it out? What's so much better about these ones that we just sold her? They're like, oh, it's actually a little bit worse, but now we get a cut of her profit. So, yeah, the job didn't last long. I was terrible at it. I was very good with people and getting into their homes, but then when it'd get down to the point of actually selling the contract, they'd be like, hey, you gotta move their policies over. And then I would turn off the phone and just be like, hey, you guys really don't need this. You have a great day. Now, don't get me wrong, man. There's a lot of money in these sort of jobs, but I don't know. That stuff eats at your soul.
Next story. Worked at an Italian restaurant. Everyone who worked there was very professional and loved their jobs. Owner, however, was a total moron who couldn't run a restaurant to save his life. One night it starts to get very busy, and we start to restrict the amount of new tables we are serving so we can keep service to a high standard, so our chefs can keep up. Owner is having none of that. He orders us to make even more space in the back for customers. We end up with about 60 customers between 2 chefs and 3 waiters. We can handle 30 at most on any other day, on top of any takeaway pizza orders we also do. We start taking orders, and we can't reach enough tables in time. We can't get drinks out quickly. The kitchen collapses almost straight away from having to prepare hundreds of dishes simultaneously. The boss and his mates take up 2 tables and start ordering tons of food and being loud and unpleasant. I start reaching my breaking point from complaints, stress, and frustration. The boss eventually realized the whole restaurant is collapsing when guests start leaving after not getting starters for an hour. One of his friends calls us up to order a pizza and is rude and difficult on the phone. I ask him to call us back when he decides what to get. Boss storms over to me drunk, demands to know why I'm being rude on the phone, threatens to hit me if I do it again. I turn around and go clean dishes in a fury in the back because if boss hits me out in front, all heck would break loose, and the restaurant would likely be ruined forever. So after an hour of angry glass drying, I tell the head chef/manager, I'm leaving, and I just walk out. So the restaurant is dying a slow death because they can't keep any good waiters. And I wonder why. Next story. Was the summer before my master's year at college. I was delivering pizza for some extra cash, but I didn't need the job. I'd been there for a week. Trainer told me to park out front and use the front door. After about a week, the owner told me to use the back. I said I didn't know there was a back. How do I get to that door? He rolled his eyes and went off on me about how he had never had a delivery boy ask so many dumb questions. It was one. I handed him my apron and told him immediately I would not be back after dropping off this order. It was a huge order, and I wanted the tip. And they already paid via card. Next story. My bosses went away for a week and left their total jerkhead mate in charge of the pub. I was running the bar doing every shift under the sun, and said jerkhead, who did nothing but sit around upstairs or in the bar, had a go at me for sitting down during a quiet shift. I was in the first month of pregnancy at the time, and I was exhausted. Well, that really made me mad. Then I found out from the chef that Jerkhead had been telling customers, regulars and locals mainly, that I was being temperamental and would be telling my bosses about it when they got back, which he did. And instead of my bosses coming to me and discussing it, they took Jerkhead's word for it and basically stood at the bar having a loud enough for me to hear convo about my attitude. Bearing in mind this was all over the fact that I took half an hour to sit down. I didn't get breaks or anything, so if it got quiet and I had pretty much done all of my jobs, I'd take a break. And I was pregnant! Anyway, at some point after, they had a nice loud discussion about why I am such an inadequate barmaid. Despite 2 years of loyal service to them, working my butt off for them, the landlord and boss made some snarky comment about my ability to pour a pint of Guinness, and I lost it. I walked into the kitchen, told the chef I'm done, and scrawled a note saying, I'm not deaf, nor am I stupid, and chucked my keys next to it and walked out. The best part was as I was getting into my car, frickin' Jerkhead pulls up, leans out the window and asks if everything is okay. He was told where to stick it, and I never heard from them after that. And when I got home, it suddenly occurred to me that that was probably the reaction they wanted. because if I stayed, they would have had to pay me maternity and they couldn't fire me for falling pregnant. Next story. I was an engineer serving my clients really well, working super hard and grinding myself to the bone. I was well liked by my bosses, coworkers, clients, even the construction guys we worked with. Then I took a planned vacation without really letting anyone in the office know. I didn't want to be a jerk, and I'm not proud of it, but I still think the firm had it coming for how I was treated. I should have quit. The following account was written for my own edification. I'll put a too long didn't read or something. I was at a firm where everyone was perpetually overworked. Not uncommon, unfortunately, but in particular, I was usually there before anyone got there, and was usually one of the last, if not the last, to leave. I brought up my chronically overfilled plate multiple times, and management kept pantomiming the motion of trying to get some work off my plate. It never happened. They knew they had a workhorse, or mule, in me, and that helped increase efficiency, I suspect. As a one-year employee, not even old enough to be a licensed engineer, I ended up being handed a massive building to design, with the help of only one person. A person who was so busy that he didn't have time to meet with me daily or even to know what was going on with the project. He was a principal of the firm, and he also held the title of chief engineer, which means he has a lot of big picture commitments that couldn't be moved to deal with the project. It was me doing all the design, calcs, and drawings. We'll call my manager Jerry, because that's his real name, and F. Jerry. Jerry had no time to answer questions or to provide the amount of guidance I needed as a young engineer. I was perpetually lost, never sure how to move forward because I just didn't have experience. I brought up many times to the CEO and Chief Operations Officer that I had no guidance, no production, no help, that I was very worried about the way the project was going. They offered me the help of an intern, someone who knew less than me. I would now have to teach myself how to manage another person in addition to how to manage a project. It was like this for a year and a half, every day, every week, without fail. Kept looking forward to the respite that never came, like a mirage in the desert. I started to fry. I was always under stress. I had a panic attack when I visited my girlfriend over Valentine's Day and my return flight was delayed by a day due to weather. Eventually, my girlfriend wants to take a week-long vacation, and I agree, it's a good idea. For my well-being, at least, maybe not a good idea overall. Who would manage my project while I'm gone? There are calls coming in many times a day about it, and it takes up most of my week at work, so how could Jerry absorb that work? He was already working nearly as many hours as me on many different projects. I stressed and stressed over how to even float the idea of a vacation to Jerry. He often would fill with rage when I asked a simple question, but he wouldn't explain to me why he was upset. He just would explode right there. I was so scared of that reaction that I convinced myself there was no way it could ever work. Previous short vacations had always been stressful, with interruptions on my personal cell phone about this project, so I did what my fried-out brain told me to do. I dealt with the project on my own every day, as usual. But at some point, a few weeks before my vacation, by this point I had my tickets to Peru, I decided I just wouldn't tell my boss at all. He had such a scattered brain that he forgot everything I told him anyway. He forgot about vacations I had told him about before. Hey, where is he? Where is he today? He called me by my wrong name all the time. So, on the last day before my trip, I wrapped up everything I could, called the project architect, and told him I would be out the next week without telling him who to contact. He was like, "All right, man, have fun," and I peaced out. He got a ton of angry voicemails when Jerry had to deal with the mess, and that is on me. I got back from Peru after a nightmare of canceled flights and even being separated from my girlfriend for most of the return trip, and I was not ready to face work. I stayed in bed the next morning, Monday, crying, and just not knowing how much trouble I was in. But in a totally petty and vengeful way, I love knowing how much that ruined his week. It was the chickens coming home to roost, and then, when they fired me, they had to assign someone new to the project in my place. Someone who knew nothing about the project and would have to sort through my calcs and drawings with no help. Turned out to be my buddy, and I told him to call about anything and I would help. because he is a good guy, and I want to make it easier on him. He ended up refusing that help on purpose because he thought it was BS that my company drove me to a breakdown. He made the project super unprofitable by spending way too much time on it on purpose. If that's not a ride or die buddy, I don't know what is. I was so well liked at my company that they had to bring together 80 people just to explain to them why I had been fired. I was the poster child of promising but burning out engineers in the company, and they definitely needed to do some damage control. But from the friends I talked to at that old company, everyone has formed their own opinion on the incident, independent from what management has told them. Too long didn't read? I'll try. Was a well-liked and high-performing engineer, but was overworked due to a project management structure that left me high and dry with no help. After bringing this up time and time again to the highest levels of the company, I gave up and took a vacation with very little warning. I was fired for leaving the company high and dry with no one to help on the project while I was gone. Oh, the irony. Then the company didn't have access to the person who did all the drawings, calculations, and communications, and it all crumbled. Next story. The last time I quit a job, I did so almost immediately after my shift was over, so I guess that doesn't count. When I was 16, I had a job as a gopher at a tanning salon / vintage gaming lounge. It was off the books, and I didn't get paid on a regular basis, but I figured it was better than nothing. I pretty much did everything and anything at this job, but towards the end I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing. My then supervisor wanted me to fix up a new store location, and I tried my best, but it wasn't enough. By this time, I wanted to get paid on a regular basis. But whenever I brought this topic up, my supervisor would beat around the bush or offer to pay me in other ways. Instead of paying me money on a regular basis, he'd want to loan me video games, or he even wanted to pay for a gym membership. This last time he started to insult me by saying I was a disgusting fat piece of slob and I needed to lose some weight. Take this gym membership. He then said a 16-year-old shouldn't be overweight and that he was going to offer me something better than money, a paid membership to the gym to lose all that weight and completely change my life. Look, I wasn't morbidly obese or anything, I was just a little overweight. This all came out of nowhere, and I decided to quit when he was no longer around. I felt very disrespected, and I didn't want to be around someone like that. I had a bunch of the store's merchandise in my bedroom closet, and prior to quitting, I brought most of it back. I ended up staying with some Sega Genesis games and never went back to that store or saw my supervisor again. That was around 10 or 11 years ago. Holy crap, dude, that's like the worst counteroffer of all time. Hey, can I get paid for all the hard effort and work I'm doing? How would you like, more work at the gym for free, just on yourself? Or I guess I could loan you some video games. Get out of there, dude. You deserve better than that. Hope you're getting paid for all the hard work you've been doing thus far. Next story. Shortly after high school, many years back, working at a Wendy's. It wasn't a terrible gig for that time. Pay was decent. Hours weren't too bad, but had a couple crap coworkers near the end of my time. The day I left, this one girl who would be flirty with the older assistant manager to not do crap refused to do her part of the stocking before we got off. He then proceeded to tell me I needed to do it. I refused to, as that was her area, and I had already handled mine. Then I got chewed out by him as she was walking out with a smile saying bye. I proceeded to walk to the time clock, telling him, "Shut up, man!" He then proceeded to tell me that we could take this outside if I wanted to, and I would find out just how old he really was. I just stared at him. I punched out and left. I didn't show up for my next shifts. I was called with a half-butt apology and them wondering if I had reported it to the corporate or not. I hadn't, but you can bet your sweet butt I did after it. Next story. I worked for about 2 days in a large chain retail store, specifically in the liquor store, before just walking out. First and probably only time I'll ever do it. It was a few years back. I just broke up and moved away from my ex. I wasn't physically happy with myself, just kind of burnt out in general. I took the job just to have some crappy minimum wage income. Now, initially I applied for a beer steward position. I figured a friend vouched for me, plus having roughly 3 years of managing a liquor store, plus drastically improving the beer selection, it was good enough. I was told I was fine enough, but they were going to internally hire. I get it, but it still sucks. My consolation prize was a low-paying clerk for liquor. It sucks, but it's temporary. I needed the job. I was maybe 28 at the time, pretty used to being in manager roles. My prior several jobs I was. Anyway, day one is half paperwork, and then training. I know how to use a POS machine, point of sale, not piece of crap. My state is also a controlled liquor state, so every bottle has a code. The 066M is the Ohio code for a pint of JD. Needless to say, I knew a lot from prior experience. A younger dude, probably barely 21, is my trainer. A customer walks in asking about whiskey, which I enjoy, along with beer. We talk and describe different flavors. He settled on something, and I go to ring him up. Enter the liquor code, take some money, nothing complex. The kid lets our area manager know, and I was told I can't finalize sales yet due to messing up liquor polling, an end-of-night tracker for liquor sales reordering, and I explained the situation, how it's actually perfectly fine because the guy paid for bottle X, code XYZB. Anyways, bored for the remaining 8 hours. Next day, about an hour in, no one shows around to ring out a customer, and he asks to be rung out after we were discussing beers and wines and cordials. I say, sorry, I'm too new here, let me get someone else. Dude is surprised, brings me to the manager, only guy on shift, to ring him out. No problems? Customer leaves and the manager was like, you could have easily checked him out, you know. I'm confused because yesterday I couldn't. Manager pitches a female dog for like 10 minutes. I go up, I'm like, I'm sorry man, this isn't going to work. I've got more knowledge and experience than what you need, but you berate over nothing. I applied for a different position, not this anyway. I don't need this crappy attitude for $7.25 an hour or whatever you're giving me, and I left a smock on the register and I walked out. I got a much better job within 3 months. My friend actually called me a month in. Never told her that I quit, but to reapply for the beer position because their internal guy was so clueless and immature. I laughed, and I said, yeah, I quit there already. Next story. My brother witnessed a kid at Subway that he thought was most likely on his first day trying to make a cold cut combo. The lady asked him to put mayonnaise on one side of the sandwich and put spinach on it. He asked her to repeat herself, and she said, put the mayonnaise on one side of the sandwich and put spinach on it. Apparently this was all it took as the kid threw the sandwich on the ground, walked out while screaming at the people he worked with. Well, my brother got a free sandwich out of it, but said it was the most surreal thing he had ever experienced. $5 and $5 fired. What was the deal with spinach and mayo on two different sides? I threw it on the ground. Very interesting. But you know what? We'll all take a free sandwich. Anyways, guys, that concludes our stories of walking out, quitting your job in the middle of the day, and all the hectic circumstances in which your employees, job, maybe different coworkers will take advantage of you and make life harder than it really needs to be. So don't be afraid to move on and go find better things. But that being said, if you guys have any more stories that you would like to share, feel free to drop them down below because I love reading them and I love hanging out with you, and we will see you guys in the next one.